Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood at the grave of the person you loved the most only to realize you never truly knew them at all? When the grief isn't just for their death, but for the truth they buried with them. This isn't just a story, it's my life. And everything changed at my husband's funeral. The day of William's funeral was gray in a way that felt personal. The sky hung low heavy, as if even heaven couldn't look me in the eye. I arrived early, dressed in black, the image of a devoted widow. For 27 years, I had been William's wife. No glamour, no scandals, just quiet dinners, birthdays with 2 candles instead of children, and a life built on trust. Or so I thought. Every year, William spent half his time traveling for work. He said he was in logistics. No phone calls, no emails. He claimed he was old-fashioned. I believed him because love, real or imagined, blinds you gently. Inside the church, faces turned toward me, unfamiliar yet sharp with something I couldn't name. I assumed they were colleagues, people from his other life in another city. But when their eyes lingered too long, I felt it, the silent question threading through the pews. What is she doing here? Then I saw her. A woman near my age standing at the front. She wore black like me, but her grief was different, harder, furious. Beside her stood 2 adults, a man and a woman, their faces pale with anger. I smiled politely, foolishly, not realizing I was staring at William's other family. The service ended, and as I turned to leave, a voice cut through the murmurs. Unbelievable. She has the nerve to show her face here. I froze. The son's voice cracked with fury as he pointed straight at me. You ruined our family. You were nothing but a mistress. The word mistress echoed in the vaulted ceiling, followed by gasps and whispers. The other woman, his wife, stood motionless, eyes fixed on me. She knew, and I had no idea. I walked out in silence, my heart pounding like it wanted to escape. That night, I sat on my living room floor, still in my funeral dress, staring into the dark. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body was too numb to process betrayal this vast. 27 years of a marriage that wasn't real, a husband who belonged to 2 homes, 2 women, 2 lives. I wasn't a widow. I was the other woman who never knew. The days after blurred into humiliation. My phone buzzed with messages from people I once called friends. Can't believe you'd show up, one said. He had a real family, said another. Online strangers posted photos from the funeral, my face blurred but recognizable. The mistress who wanted money. The liar who showed up to gloat. No one asked what I knew. They just decided I was guilty. I tried to hold on to denial to tell myself there was a misunderstanding. But when I opened our financial records, the truth was unmerciful. Regular wire transfers to another household, a second health insurance policy, rent payments on a home I'd never seen. Every lie had a receipt. Every trip, every 6-month contract perfectly aligned with his other life. I stopped answering the door. Avoided the grocery store, drew the curtains. Grief became isolation, and isolation became paranoia. I was over 50, childless, branded, and alone. I looked at our wedding photo, his hand over mine, smiling like a man who meant every word of his vows, and wondered if even that smile had been rehearsed. The day of the will reading arrived like a sentence I couldn't postpone. I didn't want the money. I just needed to know if I mattered to him in any way that wasn't built on deceit. The lawyer's office smelled of dust and coffee. I walked in last, and every head turned. His first wife, Helena, sat flanked by her 2 adult children, faces carved from anger and grief. I sat apart, small, invisible. The lawyer read the document in a voice devoid of emotion. The house in New Jersey went to Helena, 2 trusts for the children. Then his voice changed. The remaining estate, retirement accounts, investments, properties in Connecticut go to Margaret Turner. The silence that followed was violent. Helena's son slammed his chair back, shouting, "She knew! She had to have known!" Her daughter's voice trembled with rage. You think we'll let you walk out with everything? I wanted to scream that I didn't ask for this, that I would trade every cent for one moment of truth, but no one would hear it. Helena's eyes met mine. There were no words, just exhaustion, betrayal, and something worse, understanding. Because she saw it now, too. We were both victims of the same man. When I finally found my voice, it was barely a whisper. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But they'd already decided who I was. I walked out feeling their stares burn into my back. Outside, the cold air hit me like judgment. I wasn't just grieving a husband anymore. I was grieving the woman I used to be. The one who believed love could be trusted. Days later, the local paper ran an article, "Secret Wife Inherits Fortune After Businessman's Death." My name wasn't printed, but everyone knew. Neighbors stopped saying hello. My inbox filled with hate. At night, I stared at the stacks of documents proving I now owned millions houses, account, stocks. All of it poisoned. I'd gone from invisible to infamous overnight, and every dollar felt like a stain I couldn't wash off. I didn't feel rich. I felt haunted. The money was his final act of control, a gift wrapped in guilt. And I was left holding it, wondering if maybe this was his way of saying sorry, or if it was just one more manipulation in a life full of them. Either way, I couldn't keep living in his shadow. I didn't know it yet, but the woman who walked out of that lawyer's office wasn't just betrayed. She was about to become something else entirely, someone unrecognizable even to herself. The red letters appeared on my garage door 3 mornings later. Liar written in dripping spray paint. I stood there barefoot on the driveway, the cold biting my skin as the word glared back at me like a mirror. Neighbors slowed their cars as they passed, pretending not to look. One of them offered to help me clean it, but I declined. For 3 days, I left it there. Maybe part of me believed I deserved it. Maybe another part wanted the world to see what one man's lies could do, how easily a reputation could rot overnight. But on the 4th morning, I woke up different. I scrubbed the letters away layer by layer until the door gleamed white again. That was the day I decided I would stop apologizing for sins that weren't mine. The hate didn't stop, though. Helena's daughter began posting online screenshots from court filings, long paragraphs about the mistress who stole her father's fortune. The comments came in like wildfire. Blood money. Rot in hell. You'll never buy forgiveness. I deleted every message, but they multiplied faster than I could keep up. Then came the lawsuit. Helena's children were contesting the will, accusing me of manipulating a vulnerable man, claiming I'd pressured him into changing his estate. The irony almost made me laugh. The man who'd fooled us both was now turning us against each other from the grave. My lawyer assured me the case was weak. There's clear documentation, he said. William was of sound mind. You have nothing to worry about. But I still couldn't sleep. Fear isn't rational. It doesn't care about facts or signatures. Every creak in the house sounded like a threat. Every knock on the door made my stomach twist. One morning, I found an envelope taped to the front door. No stamp, no name. Inside was a photograph of me outside the post office. On the back, scrawled in thick black ink, "How's the blood money? Maggie." I dropped it, stumbled to the sink, and threw up until there was nothing left but tremors. That afternoon, I called my lawyer again. "I want to settle," I said. "You don't need to," he replied, calm but firm. "They'll lose." "I know," I said quietly, "but I'm done living in a war zone." He didn't argue. Peace, after all, has its own price. I called Helena next. Her voice was tired, but not surprised. "I've seen what they're doing," she said softly. "I didn't know about the photo." "I don't want to fight anymore," I told her. "I'll divide the estate, not because I owe them, but because I want to be free." There was silence, then a long sigh. Meet me tomorrow, she said. We met at the same cafe halfway between our towns, the place where we'd first faced each other weeks earlier, two widows bound by betrayal. This time she looked softer, older maybe, but calmer. They're angry, she said when I sat down. They don't know what to do with it. Neither did I admitted. We talked for over an hour about grief, about motherhood, about guilt. By the time the coffee was cold, we had drafted the bones of an agreement. A portion of the inheritance would go into a trust for her grandchildren. Another would fund charities in William's name. The rest would be mine to keep or give away as I saw fit. As we stood to leave, she hesitated. For what it's worth, she said, I believe you didn't know. I think he thought he was protecting you. Maybe this was his way of making things right. I wanted to tell her that no amount of money could make deception right, but I didn't. We both already knew. When I got home that night, the house felt lighter somehow. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture we'd chosen together, the curtains he'd insisted were too expensive, the photographs I hadn't yet boxed away. They didn't feel like his anymore. They felt like relics of a stranger's life I'd been tricked into living. I knew then what I had to do. Within a month, I sold the house. Every item I packed felt like shedding a layer of grief. I gave away the furniture, donated most of the clothes, and left behind everything that smelled like him. I bought a small cottage 2 towns over, a white one with a maple tree out front, and just enough space for quiet. No one knew me there. No whispers, no judgment. I could walk into a grocery store without seeing my name in someone's eyes. The first night I slept there, I dreamed of silence, not the accusing kind that used to fill my old house, but a soft, peaceful quiet. When morning came, I brewed tea, opened the window, and breathed air that felt like forgiveness. Later that week, I visited the local animal shelter and adopted a dog. A golden mutt with one floppy ear. I named her June. After the month, everything fell apart, and the month I decided to rebuild. June followed me everywhere. She sat at my feet while I read, watched me as I cooked and slept pressed against my legs at night. Her steady breathing became my anchor. I began volunteering at the small library downtown, shelving books, helping children pick out stories. The librarian, Ruth, never asked about my past. On my first day, she just handed me a box of returns and said, "Think you can alphabetize these?" I nearly cried from relief at being treated like a normal person again. Weeks turned into months. I started to smile without guilt. I planted herbs by the window, painted the fence, waved to neighbors I didn't yet know. Then one morning, an email arrived from Helena. "He's still angry," she wrote. "My son. He's trying to reopen the case. Be careful." Attached were screenshots of online posts, her son ranting about injustice, about how I had stolen their legacy. My pulse quickened, but instead of fear, I felt exhaustion. I couldn't go back to living in that darkness. 2 days later, Helena showed up at my door. She looked determined, not furious. "He's not well," she said before I could speak. "He's angry at everyone, even me. But I won't let him ruin you again." True to her word, she filed a public statement defending me, her former husband's second wife, the woman she had once despised. She told the truth to anyone who would listen, that William had acted of sound mind, that he'd lied to both of us, that I was no manipulator, just another victim of his choices. When the hearing came, she sat beside me in court. The judge dismissed the case in under half an hour. No new evidence, no grounds for reopening. Outside reporters called my name, but I didn't speak. Helena did. "She is not the villain," she said firmly. "She is another casualty of the same man's deception. My son needs help, not revenge. And Margaret deserves peace." For the first time since William's death, I felt seen not as a rumor or a thief, but as a person who had survived. After the hearing, Helena and I didn't speak for a few days. I think we both needed time to breathe, to process how strange it felt to stand on the same side after everything. When she finally called, her voice was lighter. I keep thinking about what the judge said she told me. That peace isn't about justice, it's about letting go. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Maybe I said quietly, "We've both been carrying ghosts that never belonged to us." We started meeting every few weeks after that small things. At first coffee, a walk through the farmer's market, sometimes just sitting in silence. There was no forced friendship, no pretending, just two women quietly reclaiming their own stories. One afternoon, she brought a pie and a photo album. Inside were pictures I had never seen: William at a child's birthday party, William in a Halloween costume with a little boy on his shoulders, William laughing under Christmas lights that had never hung in my home. I waited for the jealousy, the anger, but what came instead was distance. It was like looking at a stranger. "Would you like to keep one?" she asked. I hesitated, then chose a single photo. William holding a baby girl, his daughter, both smiling at something beyond the frame. I didn't keep it out of love or nostalgia, but as a reminder of what deception costs, of the people it breaks. Months passed. My new life grew roots. I became Miss Maggie at the library, the lady who read stories with too much emotion, who always carried dog treats in her pocket. Children waved when they saw me in town. Neighbors stopped to chat about weather and gardens. No one asked about my past, and I stopped volunteering details. My world had shrunk, but in the best way. Small, honest, livable. Helena's daughter reached out next. She came to one of our Saturday lunches at the cafe, tense and cautious. "They call you Miss Maggie," she said finally. "My kids love your story times." I smiled, unsure how to respond. "They're good kids," I said. That was it. No apologies, no explanations. And somehow that was enough to begin thawing the ice. In early autumn, Helena invited me to her home for dinner. Her grandchildren ran around the yard chasing June and laughing until the air was full of joy I hadn't heard in years. Her daughter was there too, quieter but present. She helped me set the table, our movements wordless but cooperative. It wasn't reconciliation. It was coexistence. And sometimes that's even more powerful. After dessert, Helena and I sat on the porch watching the sun fade. "You know," she said, "for a long time I thought he took everything from me, my trust, my family, my future. But maybe we both took something back tonight." I looked at her, at the children playing at the light, softening over her yard. "Maybe we did," I said. We didn't talk about William again after that. We didn't need to. Winter crept in quietly that year. The first snow came, early soft flakes drifting across my little cottage like forgiveness falling from the sky. Then one afternoon, I found another envelope on my doorstep, plain white. No return address. My pulse quickened. Old fears waking like echoes. Inside were copies of legal filings, printed comments from forums, and one sentence in red marker. "You thought we were done." I didn't need to guess who it was. Helena's son, the one who couldn't let go. This time, I didn't throw up or cry. I called my lawyer, explained what had happened, and he told me calmly, "There's nothing new here. Let it rest." But my peace still trembled. I spent a few nights sleeping lightly. June pressed against my legs, the old anxiety scratching at the edges of calm. Then Helena called. "He sent it, didn't he?" she said. Her voice wasn't surprised, only weary. "He's angry at me now too, but I'll stop it." 2 days later, she showed up at my house again, wrapped in her winter coat, snow in her hair. "I've gone to the Attorney General myself," she said. Filed a sworn statement. "He can't touch you anymore. You've been through enough." She looked around my little home. The bookshelves, the kettle steaming softly on the stove. "You built something beautiful out of ashes, Maggie. Don't let him drag you back into the fire." When the court dismissed the reopening of the case, Helena stood beside me once more. This time when reporters gathered outside, she spoke before anyone could ask. She's not the villain, she said firmly. She's another survivor of the same deception that nearly broke my family. I will not let my son destroy what's left of us. Her words cut through the noise, simple and final. For the first time, I felt truly defended, not by a lawyer, not by documents, but by someone who had once seen me as her enemy. Weeks later, we met at the park. Helena brought sandwiches and her granddaughter who swung high on the playground, while June barked below, tail wagging wildly. You know, Helena said, watching the little girl, I used to think forgiveness was about excusing what someone did. But it's not. It's about refusing to let their actions define who we become. I nodded. He took enough from us already. We don't owe him the rest of our lives. After she left that day, I sat under the oak tree long after the sky turned gold. The wind was soft, the kind that carries memories instead of pain. I thought about William, not the lies, but the moments I once believed were real. I didn't need to hate him anymore. I didn't need to love him either. I could just let him fade like a story that had reached its final page. That night, as I locked the door and turned off the lights, I realized something profound. The life I had now, the quiet mornings, the laughter of children at the library, the loyal dog by my side, wasn't built on forgetting the past. It was built on outliving it. And that I finally understood was the truest kind of justice. Spring arrived slowly, as if the world itself was learning to breathe again. The maple tree outside my cottage sprouted tiny green leaves, and the air filled with the sound of birds testing their songs. I began each morning the same way, tea on the porch. June at my feet, the newspaper folded neatly beside me. Some days I'd still catch my reflection in the window and see the woman from a year ago, the widow everyone despised, the ghost of a scandal that refused to die. But those moments passed quickly. The peace I'd built was fragile, yes, but it was real. I joined a community gardening group. We planted tomatoes, basil, and lavender in raised beds near the library. On Mondays, I still volunteered there, reading to children in the story corner. They'd call out, Miss Maggie, do the voices again, and I'd oblige, slipping into silly accents that made them laugh. No one there cared who I'd been before, and I no longer felt the need to explain. I had stopped defending my past the day I realized it wasn't my responsibility to make other people comfortable with my truth. One weekend, Helena came to visit. She'd started growing her hair out, silver streaks catching the sunlight. She looked more alive than I'd ever seen her. We sat on the porch, June asleep beside us, watching bees hover over the flowers. The kids are doing better, she said quietly. My son wrote me a letter. Short, but it's a start. My daughter's letting me see the children more often. I think we're healing. I smiled. You deserve that. She nodded. So do you. We didn't talk about William anymore. That chapter was sealed. Instead, we spoke about books, recipes, the weather, ordinary things that felt extraordinary after all we'd been through. When she left that evening, she hugged me tightly and said, He may have lied to both of us, but he didn't destroy us. We found something he never had the strength to tell the truth and live with it. Summer came warm and slow. Helena's visits became frequent, sometimes with her grandchildren, sometimes just her. One afternoon, she brought her daughter along for lunch. I was nervous at first, but the tension between us had softened over time. Her daughter helped me set the table in the backyard. The kids adore you, she said after a while, almost shyly. They won't stop talking about Miss Maggie and her magic dog. I laughed. June has that effect on people. She looked at me, hesitant but sincere. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for what I said online. I just didn't know what to do with all that anger. Her voice cracked and I felt a lump rise in my throat. We were both hurt, I said gently, and neither of us asked for any of it. She nodded. That small exchange, those few words, felt like closing the final wound. In autumn, the air turned crisp, and Helena invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. The house was filled with noise and life children running laughter echoing through the halls, the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon. At first, I lingered on the edge of the room, unsure where I fit in. But then Helena called out, "Maggie, grab a plate before the kids take everything," and just like that, I was part of it. No labels, no roles, just a guest among family. Later that evening, as the fire crackled, Helena's daughter handed me a glass of wine. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think you were the woman who ruined my parents' marriage. But I realize now he ruined it long before you came along." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She smiled faintly, raising her glass. "To surviving the truth," she said. I clinked mine against hers. To surviving. By winter, the snow returned, blanketing the town in white silence. Then came the invitation, an elegant card with gold trim in Helena's handwriting, Christmas Eve. "Dinner. Bring June. No pressure, but we'd love to have you." I sat with it for hours, unsure whether to cry or smile. A year ago, that same woman had looked at me with pure hatred. Now she was opening her home to me. Life has a strange way of bending back toward grace. That night, I arrived at her house to the smell of pine and cinnamon. The living room glowed with warm light. Her grandchildren squealed when they saw June running to wrap their arms around her neck. Helena greeted me with a hug, not stiff, not forced, but real. "You made it," she said. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. Dinner was simple, but perfect. We talked, laughed, and passed dishes around the table like we'd done it 100 times. Halfway through the meal, Helena's little grandson turned to me. "Are you really Miss Maggie from the library?" he asked, eyes wide. I nodded, smiling. "That's me." He grinned. "Mom says you read the best stories." His mother met my gaze across the table. This time she smiled. After dinner, Helena and I sat by the tree, glasses of wine in hand, watching the children build a tower of blocks. "You know," she said quietly, "I never thought I'd see this day. I thought the pain would never fade, that I'd never be able to look at you without seeing betrayal." I stared at the twinkling lights. "And now," I asked. She exhaled slowly. "Now I see grace, survival, maybe even a little bit of forgiveness." Her words filled the silence between us like music. We didn't speak again for a while. There was no need. Before I left that night, her granddaughter ran up to me with a handmade card. 2 stick figures and a golden dog were drawn in crayon. It read, "To Tia Maggie, Merry Christmas." I held it tightly all the way home. As I drove through the snow, the world quiet and still, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the humiliation, the lawsuits, the loss. But also the unexpected healing, the strange, fragile family that had formed from the ashes. I realized that sometimes life breaks you, so it can rebuild you into something stronger, something softer, something real. When I reached home, I hung the little card above my fireplace. June curled up at my feet, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's story. I felt alive, grounded, and free. If you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal, remember this. Peace doesn't come from revenge or forgetting. It comes from choosing to live again. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of strength, forgiveness, and survival. And tell me in the comments, what does healing mean to you?